Hello friends, my name is Martinez and this is the second part of my vlog for the reading rush. I'm doing my best. It's morning, but it's still gross outside and the sun cannot be fussed. I have thought about abandoning this vlog multiple times. I don't know. I guess part of the reason I started like, do I really want to keep doing this is because last night I didn't really want to read, but I ended up reading 90 pages of A Beautifully Foolish Endeavor, which is the second book in the Carls by Hank Green. I am a big believer that a single book in a series needs to feel complete in its own right. Like, it's okay if it has a cliffhanger or an overarching mystery or something that ties it all together. Obviously, it's a series, but there needs to be a certain level of completion in a single book. I find it a little bit annoying when I don't like the first book in the series and the answer is like, no, you have to read like 3 more before it gets good. Like, I get it. I've invested in those series before and it's something that I will let people know. Or even like the first 100 pages are really slow, but the rest of it is amazing. Like, I understand I've invested in those, but also like that shouldn't be the case. The point is that I try to be like conscious of that, and so I realize that as I'm going to tell you this. But my one thing, which I said in a previous update about an absolutely remarkable thing, was that some of the supporting characters were a little flatter compared to April May, and I explained that away within the experience of the book because we are getting such a specific point of view. So it didn't bother me, but it is something that I noticed that I feel like could bother other people. And when I picked up the second book, and immediately the thing it does is almost address that in the first book. Like, that was such a satisfying reading moment for me. So I understand if you didn't like that part in the first book, that is fair, and I would not expect somebody to then pick up the second book to complete the experience. But if you are at all inclined, I just feel like the 2 different ways that he has decided to tell the story is really interesting and just makes it a very complete and satisfying reading experience. That was a lot of like talking around the fact that these first 90 pages, I'm like, ooh, yes. I'm excited for this. So even though I didn't finish a book yesterday, I hope to finish that book and maybe The Beast today. That's rather ambitious for somebody who just said that they would like to quit making this vlog. Sometimes it just bees that way. I know this was a lot of milk in my coffee, but I am one of those people that likes coffee with their milk and sugar, so that's one thing. And also this was espresso, so I felt like it was the correct amount of milk. What I really wanted to say, this is not a reading update, but I talked a lot to Nicole yesterday about kind of like how it's been getting back to work or starting a new job and still being like work from home in the middle of a pandemic. And one of the things that I have been thinking about, or I was thinking about as I made this coffee, was that in addition to my sleep schedule being totally thrown off whack because of being indoors all day and being jobless, my eating schedule was also something that like was really wild. I was finding myself not as hungry. I wasn't doing anything. I wasn't expending any energy, and because my sleep schedule was off, like I was eating at weird times. And so adjusting my sleep schedule has been a nightmare this week. I'm tired all the time. And my eating schedule, like I tried to make myself eat something as soon as I was up before starting work and then have like traditional lunch and dinner, but I don't know, it's not quite there yet. And so I'm finding that in the mornings, like I'm not hungry, but then all of a sudden I'm ravenous, and I've been eating like a really large lunch or early dinner, which is different. So it's like all over the place, which is to say that I didn't really want coffee or breakfast when I woke up this morning, and then suddenly at whatever time it is now, I was like, you know what I want? Coffee and breakfast. So really am enjoying this entire experience. Today's the day, apparently, of the non-reading update, but I wanted to know if any of you guys do stupid things like this. Like in my apartment, I have a perfectly good dining room table, like right there, you know, seating for 4. Beautiful. And yet I sit here in my kitchen. I correct myself. I stand here on my kitchen counter to have my tomato soup and grilled cheese. Just literally standing next to where I made it, eating. all the time. This is where I eat. This is how I eat. Why did I buy a dining room table? As you guys can tell, I ended my first part of my vlog, but then I had like footage from yesterday and now it's today. You know, it's all good. Today I'm going to be watching my 3 nieces and 1 nephew, and then I'm spending the weekend with my immediate family. We will still be in isolation just with each other. So I spent this morning getting ready and packing like a weekend bag, and I'm really excited just to be around my family and around people. I'm treating this like a little break. I packed so it felt like, you know, I was going somewhere, even if it's, you know, just over yonder. Really excited, and I'm really behind on reading. I did not really read anything last night. I read a few more pages of The Beast and I just fell asleep. So it is day 5 and I've read 2 books. I'm in the middle of 2 other books. I'm behind is what I'm saying, but I'm gonna have a ton of reading time this weekend, I think. And because I broke this up into 2 parts and part 1 is already like up, I feel pressure to finish this off. So we're gonna read. We are going to do it. We're gonna read so much this weekend. Hello. So a couple things ended up happening this weekend. There's so many places that I could start, but let's start here. I was reading throughout the weekend. I didn't read very much on Friday, but I had in my head that I could probably finish 5 books by the end of the weekend. I finished 2 early in the week, An Absolutely Remarkable Thing by Hank Green and Beach Read by Emily Henry, and I absolutely loved both of these. This was a reread, so I knew I was going to enjoy it, but I bumped it up half a star to 4.5 stars, and I gave this as well 4.5 stars. On Friday, the kids absolutely took up all of my time, and I spent the rest of the weekend there, as I said. So we were in the pool. I was reading a lot, especially poolside. It was great, but I wasn't updating a lot. So I started to feel like this was getting a little bit away from me. And then Sunday happened, but before we get there, I guess I'll talk to you about what I did end up reading. So the 3rd book I finished was Big Friendship by Amina Tussaud and Anne Friedman. This was my book of the month pick for July, and it is from the host of the Call Your Girlfriend podcast, and it is just basically about their friendship, but also about like big friendships in general. And big friends is what they called something that's like a little bit beyond best friends. Their entire reasoning is that best friend doesn't really capture what a big friendship is and how essential these friendships end up being in people's lives. I tabbed a few things. There were things that were definitely like hitting home in terms of some of my big friendships, and particularly with my friendship with Nicole, who I mention on this channel all of the time because she is, you know, essential to like my life, but also we make things together, much in the way that So and Friedman do. So there were so many things about what they were talking about and their experience. They also met in their like mid-20s, and Nicole and I met in our early 20s, and they've been friends for about as long as Nicole and I have been friends. They're interracial best friends and we're interracial best friends. So a lot of these tabs are just me tabbing things that were so close to my experience and that gave words to my experience in a way that was just really affirming and beautiful and made me very, very emotional. That said, this book is interesting because it's part memoir of their friendship, but then like part just talking about friendship, and it's supposed to be informative, but it almost comes across a little self-helpy. Like I can't describe like the feeling of self-help that this gave me at times, and I am not a big fan of self-help books, specifically because of like that feeling and atmosphere. So this was like half and half for me of times when I was like in it, like I love this, and particularly when it was more memoir and exploring their specific friendship. When it got a little bigger and started talking about like friendship in general, or relaying information that or research that others had done, or got into like that self-helpy realm, I wasn't enjoying it as much. So overall, like I wouldn't discourage people from reading this because I still had an excellent time. It was useful, it was helpful in that it I don't know, it gave me things to think about within my own friendship. So I would recommend reading it, but its success as a book is kind of mixed to me, and I ended up giving this 3 out of 5 stars. And then I finished the book The Beast by Oscar Martinez, and I have a similar experience with this in that I was engaged the whole time that I was reading it. It was full of excellent information, and you can just tell the amount of hands-on research that Martinez did throughout this. I mean, he was writing the rails alongside the migrants, and he was all over Mexico, stopping and talking to officials, here in the United States, and just the expansiveness of this project is super, super impressive, and I'm grateful to it for the things that it ended up teaching me and showing me, and how comprehensive it was. Martinez is a journalist, so there was a level of just kind of evenness, even though I won't say unbiased because there's no such thing, but it was very, like I said, comprehensive and even. My issue with it was with its success as a nonfiction book. I personally enjoy nonfiction that has more of a narrative timeline or a narrative bent, and that's just my taste. This was all over the place. It really felt weirdly organized to me. We were jumping around to like places and experiences that the migrants were having, and then some of the things felt repetitive because we talked about it like in another section, but we were talking about it here. And I understand that there's no clean timeline because this is research of years, but I still feel like it could have been better organized than how it was. That was my major like issue with it, was just how all over the place that it felt. And so I ended up giving this 3.5 out of 5 stars. I never finished Beautifully Foolish Endeavor, and there were a couple other books on my TBR that people were really excited for me to read, including Spinning Silver and Mexican Gothic, which are still priorities for me. I just ran out of steam at the end there, and I guess I went back and forth on whether or not I would post this video and this vlog, but the reason that I am is because I even tweeted about this. Like, I did my first part of my vlog, and I understood as soon as I published it, like, okay, now you're creating an expectation, not even so much for like you guys watching, but for myself, that if I did a part 1, I'm gonna do a part 2. And I immediately felt that like, okay, I have to do this. And so kind of living with that in my head and like fumbling my way through the end of this vlog, I still was thinking about, like, this morning I put up a part 1. I just don't want to like leave it hanging. So I figured I would just show you the updates I have and then wrap it up this way, not only with the reading that I had, but kind of what happened with the end of the reading rush. I guess this is also sort of like indicative of like other conversations that we have in BookTube. So the first thing that I want to address is that I have nothing against Ariel and Raylene. I met Ariel one time. We were on a panel together at VidCon, and she was incredibly lovely and funny, and exactly what you see in video is kind of like how Ariel is in real life. So I had a great time like being on that panel with her and chatting with her. I have absolutely nothing against her, and the only reason that I'm like putting that out there is just because I think that people are quick to assume that anything that happens within BookTube is interpersonal instead of like something else or outside of that. This is not interpersonal drama. Again, I have nothing against those two women who are running this. I know how hard it is to run events. Immediately people are like, well, this is bad communication. Why didn't you talk to that person personally? Why are you bringing your interpersonal drama to... This is not interpersonal. I saw something that left a bad taste in my mouth. I tweeted about it. Lots of other people tweeted about it. And this is about us as consumers of a thing that was organized, kind of giving feedback or talking about the thing or whatnot. So that's kind of first things first. I'm sorry if somebody came here for some tea about how I don't like certain people. This is not that at all. The other thing is that people start immediately like, you know, okay, that's enough, or people are blowing this out of proportion. And I understand because things can snowball online, but I always ask the question, like, who gets to determine when something has been talked about enough? Like, who's that arbiter? And, you know, are you going to tell me that I can talk about it because, you know, I'm the last one in line who can, but somebody else coming after me that was also affected or also has an opinion they want to share online, like, they can talk about it? It's like a tricky thing to navigate in terms of, you know, how much we're allowed to talk about something before people decide that they're fed up. The reason that I specifically am addressing it in this video, and the reason that I feel like it feels like it's being talked about a lot, is that we were already in the middle of this conversation when it started. So many of us were participating in the reading rush. So many of us were talking about the reading rush. I was in the middle of making a vlog when this happened. So you know, had I not been participating at all, and had this been like a readathon that had 20 participants, like, if everybody were talking about it, then we could say, well, that's kind of out of proportion. But the conversation is going to be as loud as the audience is big. And this is one of, if not the biggest readathon in the book community. And so you have to expect that the feedback or the conversation is going to be that loud. The next thing about this is that it really was like a culmination of smaller things. A lot of people agree with kind of my sentiments, which I'm getting to, but there were a few other people that immediately were like, oh, here goes book Twitter again, here goes booktube again, like, why do we need to do this? And then also started almost like gaslighting about the severity of like what was happening in terms of, like, you know, was the offense this big? I almost said, did the punishment fit the crime? But the truth is that there has been no punishment except for like conversations that I've seen. And that's important to clarify, is that whenever we're talking about the tone of a conversation or how people are reacting, you have to, you know, clarify or admit that you're seeing a portion of the conversation. And I'm seeing the portion of the conversation that extends to my timeline or the people that people have put on my timeline. So it's definitely not the entirety of it. So most of what I've seen has been kind of in line with that, with the exception of the few people that are kind of disagreeing with sort of the conclusions or the discourse, saying that things are being blown out of proportion. And like I said, it's almost gaslighty because it has been a few small things that just sort of added up into this place where I personally had a bad taste in my mouth. And I started this vlog saying that I almost didn't participate for a couple of like personal reasons, but also because like I always have a problem or some issue with the challenges, and that's a me thing, and I know that, and I still was like, you know what, I'll just do it because I want to be in with the community. Like, I want to be a part of this, I want to be in the conversation, and here we ended up. So that's one of the things that I've seen a lot of people complaining about, is just like the challenges, and not from the place of like, but these aren't the, you know, challenges that I personally enjoy, but from the place of inclusivity. The other thing that I saw people talking about is how they announced the dates for this round of the readathon on Juneteenth. And again, like, you know, you could sit here and rationalize that as much as possible. They're Canadian, they didn't know, or they weren't aware, but it's sort of like that lack of awareness that people are coming for and are tired of. You know, there's a certain amount that you cannot be aware, but when you're doing something on this level and to this audience, there you have to be aware of things. You have to educate yourself, and you have to take feedback and correct and do better. You can't just keep making the same mistakes that all come back down to lack of awareness. It's not their responsibility to do any of this. They don't have to be aware. You absolutely do not. But then you can't get mad if people see that lack of awareness and see that this is not what you are interested in, is in being inclusive and aware and sensitive to sort of the things that are happening in the community that you are trying to engage, and comment on it and decide that this thing is not for them. Like, you can't have it both ways. You either want people's feedback and you want to be as inclusive as possible and you want to be connected to the community and you're going to hear that feedback and correct, or you don't care. And if you don't care, then you can't care that people are commenting on it and making their decisions accordingly. It's not like the end of the world, the hugest deal that they did this, but it is a thing that adds up against other things that have happened. And honestly, if you at that point were at all involved in the book community, not even to say anything about outside. And this was like right at the initial onset and wave of like Black Lives Matter protests, which were global, not just happening in the United States. Like if you followed one Black person, I feel like in the community at that time, you heard about Juneteenth. So I don't know, the sort of like we didn't know is not that excuse came from them, but just sort of from like looking at the two different arguments, like it doesn't play to me. And even if it did, it feeds into this larger thing that I have an issue with, which is kind of like that lack of connection and that lack of awareness. And then the third thing that was just the last straw kind of for me personally in terms of this round of the reading rush was that I was going through my subscription and I saw that they had a live show. I didn't catch it live. I clicked on the link and it said such a fun age live book club or live discussion or something of that nature. And I first of all didn't know that there was a group book at all. Like I completely missed that there was a vote on this apparently, and this is what the community chose. And so I was like, oh, I didn't know, but I've read that book. I have a review of it up on my channel. It's one of my favorite books that I've read this year. It is an incredible book. So I was like, oh, amazing, I'll tune into this. And I click in, and I admittedly did not watch the whole thing. I don't know how this played out, but within the first few minutes of the live show, they both admit that they have not read the book. And they kind of like laugh nervously about it. And at one point, Ariel even says like, a lot of you haven't read it, so that's making me feel better. I don't think that they were being like malicious and they're like laughing off of having not read this, but it was still like, it was uncomfortable for them, and it was uncomfortable for me as a viewer. I mean, there were so many ways to get around this. First of all, why name it a discussion if you're not even going to discuss the book at all? Second of all, you could have postponed. You could have said, hey, we're going to hang out today, but we didn't have enough time to read the book. We're going to do that discussion in 2 weeks. Third, you could have invited somebody who had read the books to lead that part of the discussion. Like there were so many other things that a little bit of awareness could have like done in the situation to make this better. And so that's kind of like surface level. But if you take just a step back from this, I think part of how this came about, like with the poll and picking a book by a Black author, was because people were giving this feedback of like, you're announcing it at this time, you're not acknowledging anything that is happening like in the world. And a lot of the conversation in the book community at that time, and what has continued to happen, is that we're talking about, you know, supporting Black creators and Black readers and how Black people exist within this community in the publishing industry. So this book is chosen by the book community, but the way that it's treated is just sort of like, you know, just a picture perfect example of how you can have empty activism or like these actions that are meant to convey meaning or importance that don't actually have any meaning or importance if you then don't follow through. Such a Fun Age by Kiley Reid is a book that has a lot of different themes, and it is a coming of age, and it is the story of this one young Black woman as she tries to find her place in the world, and she's dealing with moving around white spaces as a Black woman. But like larger themes in that book, it is about performative activism. It is about the way that white people tried to borrow the legitimacy of Black women specifically. It is about fake wokeness. It is about, you know, all of these things that if you just pair them to the actions that actually happen are, you know, a bummer to say the least, ironic, I guess you could say, just in general, not the optics I'm sure that the reading rush was going for. I was kind of like let down basically, and it didn't leave me really wanting to put any more effort into this in terms of reading or vlogging or anything like that. Are there people chomping at the bit to attack something because it's popular? I'm almost sure that that is the case. However, I can't not talk about things, and we can't not have these conversations in the book community worried about like kind of the extremes on either end, especially if they're not happening on my timeline using my platform. Like, I'm moderating my spaces. I can't be afraid of things that might happen anywhere else on the internet, and essentially letting that stop these conversations happening. I think we do need to be careful. I think we do need to be respectful. I think that we don't have to bully in order to have these conversations. These conversations are important just in kind of understanding our community. And this, I think, is a good sign, I would say, that our understanding of what it means to be an inclusive event for this community is changing, if ever so slightly, or ever so slowly. These are good moves to make, and these are good things to consider. Who are you making readathons for? Who do they include? Those are absolutely important questions to ask. And if this is the jumping off point to that conversation, I think that is a worthwhile conversation. I think this also highlights something that we should all be thinking about, and that is how we talk about books by Black authors and other marginalized creators, and kind of our intent in including them in our reading. I've seen two extremes. One where people are reading these books and including them with like the sole focus of like, this is gonna teach me, which isn't always the correct way. And then you have something like this where it's like, this is checking off a box, and it has very much the air of like, we did it because we had to, and that is also not the correct thing. This shouldn't be about filling a quota for you. This shouldn't be about doing the bare minimum in order to not be called out, or whatever it is that you feel like you have to do. Like, this should be important to you because representation is important to you, because reading diversely is important to you, because you understand that the role that fiction and media has in our society, because we exist as a community that does include Black authors and Black creators, and you value us in this community, and you value our stories in this community, and you value our lived experience in this community, and all of that feeds into how you engage with this community. I do know that they extended an initial apology. I really don't want to comment about that here, but I do know that it will take time to see what they ultimately do about this, if they do anything. And like I said, they don't have to do anything. It's just going to inform a lot of people's decisions about whether to participate or support. I don't think it's my like job or duty to talk about these things. And again, it was really a bummer for me like on that day, especially because I had invested the hours and decided to participate. But I'm not like, I will move on from this. I don't know, depending on what they do next, I guess, or their response, that will determine if I ever participate in a reading rush again, depending on their challenges and things of that nature. But that's kind of where I am with it right now. I've said my piece. I think it's important to have the conversations that are kind of building up off of this, including what is inclusive in the booktube community, what it means to be an inclusive event, and what we're talking about when we're talking about diversifying your reading. Like, absolutely, let's keep talking about those things, and let's keep bettering ourselves and bettering this community. I guess that's it. 4 books was not too shabby for a week, especially because they were all books that I took a lot away from. And yeah, let's chat down in the comments. Did you see all of this go down? What are kind of your thoughts and feelings about not only the reading rush, but sort of like these larger topics of conversation? How were the conversations that you were seeing? Were they civil? Did they kind of spiral off into other territory? And how'd you do in this week of reading? I would love to talk to you about all of those things. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you guys soon. Prime reading time if I can get myself together and decide what I want to read. I have a whole TBR. I know you're reminding me. Hey Maddie, don't you have a whole TBR? Don't worry about it.